Hi everyone, welcome to channel Tutomation. In today's session, we will see about response schema validation. So far in our previous sessions, we have seen how to validate response body. We have seen how to validate headers, cookies, status code, and response body as well. But today we will touch a topic where we will see how to validate response schema validation. So we have to understand first what is schema. So response schema and response body are two different things. So first let's understand what is exactly JSON schema. So whenever we hit any request, it might be get request or post request, we get some response. That response will be in JSON format or XML format. In today's session we will focus upon JSON response type. So let's take an example where we get JSON response. But what is exactly JSON schema? JSON schema is a standard format for defining the structure and rules of JSON object. It is like a contract that JSON data must follow in the response. For example, let's say you are getting response like this, where there is a name which is in string format and there is age which is in number format or integer format. So when we validate response body, what we will check? When we validate response body, we will check whether name contains value as Parag or not, whether age contains value as 30 or not. That we will verify during response body validation. But when it comes to schema, schema means it's a basically a standard format or structure of the response. For example, what should be the data type of name? What should be type of age variable? So if you see, this is a response body. For this response body, this is a JSON schema. Now if you see, this is basically a JSON schema which says that name type should be string, age type should be integer, and both name and age are required parameters. So this is called as a schema. It is a structure of the response body. It is a structure, or we can say a contract of the JSON response. So JSON schema means it is basically a structure. For example, name should be string, age must be an integer, and both name and age must be present. So that is the schema of this specific response body. And when we validate the response schema, we actually don't validate the response body. We just check whether corresponding JSON schema is correctly coming or not. Especially when response are very complex, or let's say when responses are larger. In that situation, we have to validate JSON schema. So what is the main difference between JSON schema validation and JSON body validation? So let's see. So what is it? So response body is actual data which can be in the format of JSON or XML which we receive in the response. But what is schema validation? Schema validation is process of checking if response follow those specific rules or not. So if in response there is a variable which should be in string format, there is price, let's say, which is should be in integer format. So that structure comes under the schema validation. What is the purpose of response body validation? So to view or test data values directly. Whereas we validate the schema to validate structure, type, and format of the response. Response body validation is used to validate data correctness. So we check in response whether data is correctly coming or not, that we verify during response body validation. But in schema validation, we have to ensure that data structure and consistency is correct or not. For example, name should be in string format, age should be in integer format. If age is coming in the form of string, then that will mismatch. So that will be failed test case for schema validation. So that is the main difference between response body validation and schema validation. So if you see, this is a response and for its corresponding JSON schema. We will see practical example as well. So before that, let's understand why schema validation is important in API testing. Schema validation is the process of checking whether API response body matches with expected JSON schema or not. It ensures that API returns the data in correct format. It also helps to detect bugs in early when the structure changes unexpectedly. It validates required fields, data types, and constraints. Schema validation is process of checking whether response body follows the expected structure or not. So that is comes under schema validation. Now we will see how to validate the schema by using practical example. So for that we will use similar example. If you see here, this is a request. In restful-api.dev, we have one get request. When we will hit this request, this is the endpoint or URL of that request. Let me just copy it. And this is the response which we will receive. This is the entire response which we will receive. But in today's session, we will not validate response data. We will just validate schema for this response. So if you see in Postman as well, if I put this URL and if I hit the get request, it will give me this specific response. Now we want to validate JSON schema for this response. But first we should have schema for this JSON response. So this is a response body. I will just copy this response body and I want its corresponding JSON schema. So online there are multiple tools or websites are there which will convert JSON to JSON schema. So there are multiple websites. So you can simply search JSON to JSON schema. In Google, you can simply search JSON to JSON schema. So you can use any website. So I will just open the first website. After opening this first website, we have to just provide the JSON response here. So I have copied that response. I will just paste it here. So this is the entire response. It is the entire JSON response body. Now I want to convert the JSON response to JSON schema. So first I will convert this JSON response to JSON schema. So you have to just click on this generate schema. So it will give you entire schema for that specific response. Now this is a schema for that JSON response. What we have to do is now we have to copy this schema. So I will just use copy. So I have copied this entire schema of the response and we have to paste that in another file. So I will just go to Eclipse. In Eclipse, I will create a new file. First, let's create a new file. I will just create a new class. I'm naming it as JSON schema validation. Let's create this class. So in this class, we will write a test method which will validate the JSON schema for our response. But before that, we have to create one JSON file in which we have to paste this JSON schema which we have just generated. So I have just copied this inside our project. If you see this src test resources folder, so we have to create a new file into this folder only, src test resources folder. In this folder, let's create new file. Let's name it as products response schema dot json format. We have to save this in the form of dot json file. So this is a file which I have created inside test resources folder, and in this I will just copy that JSON schema which I have generated in that online website. So this is the schema file which we have generated. I will just save this file. So we have created our response schema.json file. We have pasted the expected schema of that response. Now we will come into our test class file. So inside this class, let's create a new method. I'm just creating a new method. I'm naming it as test JSON schema validation. Let's use at the rate test annotation. Let's import testng annotation as well. And also we require rest assured static packages as well. So let's import rest assured static packages. So I'm just copying those static packages, and let's put those static packages in this of our file. Now our regular syntax for rest assured, that is given, when, and then section. Given, when, and dot then section. Now we, since it's a get request, in given section we don't require anything. So I will just skip that given section. Inside the when section, as usual, since we are hitting which request type, dot get request, so we have to put the URL in this. So what is the URL which we are going to hit? This is the URL. Let's copy this URL and let's paste it here. Once it hit this URL, we will get the response. But now we don't have to validate the response actually. We are just going to validate the schema of that response. The schema file which we have already created, in which we have pasted that schema of the expected response. Now we have to use one method, that is in then section we have to use assert that method dot body, and in this dot body we have to use one class, that is JSON schema validator dot matches JSON schema in class path. So this is entire method which we have to use, and in this method we have to provide name of that JSON file which we have generated. So we have to provide name of that JSON file. So what is the name of that JSON file? Products response underscore schema dot JSON. So that's why we have to paste, and we have to create that file inside the resources folder only. So it will know that in which file it is going to check the schema, or it will compare that schema. So what we have done is we have used given, when, and then. In when section we are hitting this URL with the get request type. It will fetch the response, and now we have to compare the schema of that response. So we have created one file, that is products underscore response underscore schema dot JSON file, and in that file we have pasted the schema of the response. And from where we got this schema? So what we have done, we have used online website in which we have pasted the response body, and we have clicked on generate schema. It provided us the schema of the response. Schema means structure. What is the data type for different type of values in this? Different type of values in the response. Whether it's a string data type or it's a number data type, integer data type. So that comes under the schema. So we have pasted that schema in this file. Then we have created a test method inside this class, in which we have used assert that dot body and JSON schema validator class with method matches JSON schema in class path. So this is a method of JSON schema validator class, and we have passed the name of that specific file, name of the JSON file which contains the schema. So it will compare the schema which is received in the response. Corresponding schema will be compared with this file in which we have pasted our expected schema. So now let's save this and let's execute this file. So when you execute this file, let's run as test test, and let's see whether test case gets passed or not. So in this test case, we are not comparing the response body. We are just checking the response schema. And if you see, test case is passed because the response schema which we have received is exactly matching with the expected schema. But if I want to intentionally fail this, how I can fail it? So if you go to that schema.json file, we have to change the structure, or let's say data type. So for example, if you see the response body, this is a first JSON object, or we can say first product. This is a second product. This is a third product. In third product, if you see capacity in GB, which is in the form of integer. So if you see the schema as well, for first product, second product, and if you see this is for third product, the schema is capacity in GB, which is in integer form. So instead of integer, if I say string here, I am just intentionally changing it to string data. So in my expected, earlier it was integer, but I have changed it to string. Now let's save this file, and again let's execute our test case. Now this time it will fail because this time in the response it will get integer, but in expected we are saying string. So if you see, test case is failed. Why it is failed? That also it is saying found integer but expected string for capacity value, right? So it is expecting it to be in string format because we intentionally changed it to string, but it is receiving as integer. That's why the test case is failing. So again, if I change it to integer and let's save it, and again let's execute this test file, run as test, it will pass again. So this time it should pass. So if you see test case is pass. So this is how we can validate the JSON schema. So let's revise quickly. So what is exactly schema? So schema means a structure, a format of the response. So if you are receiving the response body, there has to be some format. For example, name is in string format, age is in the form of integer type, and both the values are required. So this is a schema for this response. So when you validate the response body, we check the data in the response. But when we validate the schema, we check for the data type especially. For example, structure, type, and format of the response. And if you want to validate what we have done, we have first got the response schema for our response body. We have used online website for that. So we have used this online website. There are multiple websites by which we can convert the JSON to JSON schema. So this is a JSON response and we have converted into its JSON schema. So this is a JSON schema which I want to validate. So I have just copied this JSON schema. We have created a new file which is in the JSON format inside src test resources folder. So inside this package only we have to create this .json file in which we have pasted that schema which we are expecting, and after that we have hit the get request, and then we have used assert that method with JSON schema validator dot matches JSON schema in class path, and in this you have to pass the JSON file, name of the JSON file. So it will check in the resources folder, it will get this file name, and it will verify, it will compare the JSON schema of the response which we have received here. If it is matching, the test case will pass, and if it is not matching, test case will fail. So that is basically response schema validation. So I hope you have understood this session. In next session we will see about schema validation when the response is coming in XML form. So in today's session we have seen for JSON response, but sometimes response can come in the form of XML as well. So for that, how we can validate the schema, that we will see in our next session. So thanks for watching this video. Let's meet